as you know, your disability progresses, and so you need more hours for attendant service. So I started looking at supportive housing units. And what supportive housing is that there are accessible apartment buildings, there are accessible apartment units that are fully integrated into regular apartment buildings. And the beauty of that is that they also provide more service. And the way the supportive housing unit works, it's also on a preset schedule that you have, but they also are on site, which is great. In case of an emergency, they're there 24 hours, 7 days a week. Now, I currently live in a supportive housing unit, and I decided to move for several reasons. One is that I'm still fairly young, and I always wanted to live downtown Toronto, so I decided to fill my application in and move to a apartment building downtown. Plus, as I said, my service needs increased from about 3 hours to about 5 hours. And it was really difficult for my outreach provider to provide those type of hours that I needed. And a lot of the service that I needed would come either from my parents or my brother. So I decided that I really wanted to be independent, really wanted to live downtown, I really wanted to have my choice of where I wanted to be, and so therefore I filled out an application to live in a supportive housing unit. There's also another type of attendant service, and that's transitional and life skills programs, and I'm going to defer that to Hazel to talk about that in her presentation. And there's a fourth type of attendant service provision in Ontario, and it's called the Student Assistance in Ontario. And basically this is a contingency fund where people with disabilities who maybe don't have attendant services yet, or maybe they do have attendant services with their provider, but find themselves needing more hours when they're going to attend university or college. And what happens there is that either the consumer or the attendant service provider applies through our organization saying that there's a need for additional funding for attendant services so that the person can attend university. If there is funding through the Ministry of Health, the person will then be allotted hours so that they can attend university. I will talk about the Project Information Center and direct funding in the next slides, but what I wanted to stress is that there are waiting lists for all these programs. For attendant outreach service, the waiting list could be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. For supportive housing, it could be about 3 years as well. And the student assistant program can also have a waiting list. Same with direct funding, which I'll mention a little bit later. Since all these programs are funded by the Ministry of Health, they must have a complaints and appeals process in case you have any problems with your attendant service provider. So, what is the Project Information Center? This is a program that's through our office, the Center for Independent Living in Toronto. And basically, this is what, having dignified social services for people with disabilities. Basically, in Toronto, there are about 8 or 10 different attendant service providers. Instead of you filling out 8 or 10 different applications, which would take forever, what we do at SILT through this project is you just fill out one application. You write down what your service needs are, where you would like to either have outreach, or if you like to live in an apartment building, you just tick off those areas that you like to live, and you just fill out one application. What we do is we process the application and then send it out to those service providers that you've chosen. So basically, it's a one-stop application process. So, I'm going to talk about direct funding. What is direct funding? Direct funding is an alternative to attendant outreach and supportive housing services. Basically, it allows you, a person with a physical disability, to become the employer of your own attendants. Through this program, you can have a maximum up to 6 hours a day, depending on the service level that you need, and that's individually negotiated once you go through an interview process. It's funded by the Ministry of Health in Ontario, and with the eligibility, it's very similar when you apply through the other attendant services, the exception being that you must complete a written application for the direct funding program on your own initiative, and then you must also go to an interview through a selection panel to discuss your needs. So, once you go through this interview and are accepted, there are responsibilities with this program. And they is that since you become the employer of your own attendants, you must be able to hire and sometimes, if necessary, fire, train, schedule, supervise one or more attendant workers. You must be capable of managing and accounting for your funding according to direct funding principles. Direct funding does provide bookkeeping assistance, but you must be able to manage money, time, and employees. You have to keep records of your employer information for tax purposes, and you must comply with the Ontario Labour Standards and Human Rights. So, what are the advantages of direct funding? This really exemplifies what independent living is. It provides three major advantages. One is choice. You get to choose who you want as attendants through an interview process. It's flexible and portable. What that means is that you could take your attendants from home to school, to work, and also even on vacation for 2 weeks outside of Ontario. It's also about having control. You control your schedule. Instead of having a service provider tell you that only at certain times an attendant is available, you get to choose your schedule. So it's three very powerful advantages: choice, flexibility, and control. And I'll just briefly talk about my program, which is the Independent Living Skills Training Program. What I do is I work with consumers on a one-to-one basis with individual advocacy, and they could range from issues they're having problems with their attendant service provider, or transportation, or social services, not getting their entitlements. In Ontario, it's called the Ontario Disability Support Program, and they need assistance with trying to advocate and trying to resolve some of their problems. I also provide short-term peer crisis counseling in case consumers are found in a situation where they're in crisis, either being evicted or needing to be housed right away. And I also do skill development workshops, either anger management, self-advocacy, things of that nature. I also do information workshops on behalf of SILT, talking about all of our core programs. So, we are located at downtown Toronto, and if you'd like more information, our website is www.cilt.ca. I also brought 60 info packs about our organization and the various services we provide, and I brought about 10 French brochures for the direct funding program, and you can access that information also on our website as well. Thank you very much.